southern districts. He joined the RAAF aged 18 and served from 1941 to 1945 as a bomber pilot attached to the Royal Air Force Bomber Command, and he flew 4-engined Lancaster aircraft. His elementary training was on Tiger Moth aircraft at Temora before being posted to duty in Canada, the USA, and various squadron bases in the United Kingdom. Eric flew 45 operational missions over Germany and enemy-occupied territories. He took part in the D-Day landings over France in 1944 and attacked German flying bomb sites and many industrial sites. After attacking German battleships hiding in the Norwegian fjords, his aircraft was damaged by enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire. He brought his aircraft and crew of 7 safely home with only 2 engines still operating. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross by King George VI, and after victory in Europe, he returned to Australia to take part in the war against Japan in the Pacific Theatre. Eric was discharged from the RAAF at the end of the war in 1946. He is currently the Vice President of the Pathfinders Association of Australia. He has 2 children, 5 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren, most of which live in the Shire. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to present Mr. Eric Barton, DFC.
Thank you, Darryl. Good morning, girls and boys. Good morning, ex-service men and women serving and returned. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Every serviceman and woman here today has a stirring story to tell you about their war service. I am only one of many chosen by my peers to speak to you on their behalf. I hope I can live up to this mission for today, otherwise I might be confined to barracks and given 7 days CB. This morning, I want to present an Anzac address for you in a more realistic, more pertinent, down-to-earth fashion than the usual stereotype style, dealing where Anzac came from, about the trenches in 1418, giving you statistics of how many died and the story of Gallipoli, because you already know that from your history lessons. If you don't, your children will probably teach you. I also want to dedicate my address to my good mate Brian McClenahan, a double DFC recipient. He and his family grew up here. He was also a Cronulla RSL man and a Pathfinder pilot who led the way to many targets with distinction. He gave this address, this Anzac address, 21 years ago in 1992. And I guess he's up there checking on me to see that I do the job properly. My address this morning is in 2 parts. For the first part, I want to bring Anzac into focus right here and up to this present era, and what it means to our little village of Cronulla and what it meant in 1939. Some of you may remember that. Some of you will have been here. Some will have been told by your fathers and your grandfathers what Cronulla was like in wartime. For the second part, I want to tell you what Anzac means to our servicemen and women of today and for our future families. We stand here in the dark, waiting for the sun to rise on another day, like so many caring people such as you. in small country villages across our nation, and for that matter in New Zealand, for they are our Anzac brothers also. This is no ordinary day. It's an extra special. It fills my heart with pride. It is one of celebration, not of war or winning battles, but to celebrate the courage, bravery, mateship and pride that we have with our comrades in arms, and the pride we have with our country. You caring people who are obviously here this morning, rising early to make a conscious effort to try to understand what Anzac really means. You are the ones our past servicemen and women died for, so that you shall have the ability now to carry on their traditions and keep for your children and their children, those such as my beautiful great-grandchildren here this morning, to keep our treasured way of life. This is our country's most important day, above all other public holidays. Why? Because this is the way on this morning we honour not war, but the human spirit. That vital principle that takes men and women away from their homes to another place where they face danger, such as over the years the trenches of Europe, of later years over the skies of Europe, the deserts of the Middle East and Africa, the jungles of New Guinea, the seas of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Our sailors sailed, to the degradation and humidity of Vietnam and the chemical warfare of Ancient Orange, the fields of Korea, to Timor, Borneo, and now Afghanistan. Those acts of compassion have created a permanent home in our hearts for those brave souls who wore the uniform of our country so bravely, so proudly, so honourably over so many past years, and they still do today with undiminished pride. As a backdrop to our dawn service here today, very soon the sun will rise to herald another day. In a moment we shall see this beautiful, peaceful setting so carefully tended by dedicated gardeners, especially brought up to perfection today for our enjoyment. Colourful flowers, similar to the poppies, the scent of rosemary for remembrance. Our lovely little village of Cronulla, bounded by the ocean, the rivers, the bays, the pristine national park, so far removed from war, turmoil, bloodshed, death, oppression. This is what Anzac means. Make no mistake, you have all this beauty and freedom because blood was shed in so many conflicts and is being done so today by our beautiful young men and women. This is a gift to you from the Anzacs. We don't want this picture I'm about to paint for you to ever happen again here. Once upon a time, Cronulla was not like this. In 1939, when I and many young chaps from our shire woke one morning, there was a declaration of war on the radio. Australia is at war, was an announcement made over the radio by a Prime Minister. Wasn't any TV in those days. In the ensuing years, our beaches and rocky foreshores right here were covered in barbed wire entanglements, steel bars cemented into the rocks. Look around Cronulla foreshores and you'll see the remnants of barbed wire entanglements in this form of holes drilled into the rocks and rusting remains of steel bars and concrete slabs supporting gun emplacements. all placed there in 1939 to repel expected enemy invasion. Cronulla Beach and foreshores were a no-go zone. Past Wanda, the Sandhills, all the way to Boat Harbour and down to Oak Park, you were not allowed onto the beach except in small controlled areas. Cronulla was a very strategic ocean beach because it was relatively desolate. It gave easy access to the airport, to Botany Bay, the foreshores for ships and submarines to anchor in a harbour and close to Sydney, a major centre. Our little village, for that is what it is, it was then, was at war. Every serviceman went away from their homes from here to faraway lands to keep the potential enemy invaders back where they belonged. We stopped them in their tracks. We stopped them in New Guinea, the deserts of Africa and Europe, where the Nazi regime reigned supreme over many small countries. We kept them in France. We kept them in Italy, in the Mediterranean. Some Australians say how lucky we were that we were so far away and we didn't suffer invasion. But make no mistake, if it wasn't for our Navy, our Army, our Air Force boys who travelled, who went away overseas and left their families and homes in those early years of the Second World War, you would not have your present way of life. In my war experience of RAAF Bomber Command, there were 4,050 of us, Australian air crew, who went away to Europe to serve and fly with Britain's RAAF airmen and later with the American Air Force when they joined the war later on. I was one of the lucky 1,600 who survived. More than half the original 4,050 now lie in graves across Europe, some in unknown graves. Obviously, I do not glorify war. For that matter, neither does any serviceman. A serviceman has hope in his heart, not hate. Hope for his future, his family, his country's future. The soldier does not enlist to serve his country to die, but to survive for peace. He doesn't expect to travel in a cruise ship in luxury, but a troop ship and 2 meals a day, crowded. Nor to see the world like the French Riviera or New York, but to see the deserts and the jungles of New Guinea or Vietnam. He offered his services for you and your children's future. War is not a very nice scenario. As a returned Australian Air Force pilot, I flew and fought my war in the skies over Europe for 4 years. That was never a pretty sight. To see the devastation and the death that the bombs were creating 15,000 feet below, falling on factories, railway yards, ships, harbours, at times on cities, unfortunately, to take part in 1,000 bomber raids on places like Essen, Hamburg, Berlin, Dresden. To see your mate's plane explode in front of you with 7 men inside it. See some jump out of planes with parachutes, be shot at by fighter planes, or land and be captured and sent to a prisoner of war camp and tortured. Some try to escape. To come back to base and see broken men, crew, pull them out from damaged aircraft, take them to hospital and patch them up and hope they'll fly and survive again. To be trained to fight and fly as a pilot and captain of a Lancaster bomber aircraft, to take 7 men with you into battle, knowing their lives depended on your ability, your tenacity. To bring them home to base in safety, You were trained to survive and fly and kill and fly again. Well, that is what war is all about. War is not a very valid scenario for any nation. I would think at times, what is this all about? Why am I doing this? It would be nice to be back home lying on the beach in Cronulla, but then I would think, well, if we don't do it, who will? Now I still think, why? But it's all there, documented for all time in my logbook and the records of World War II archives in London and Canberra. Why did we do this? Anzac Day is not about war. As I said before, it's about the human spirit and compassion, protecting the way of life we currently enjoy, because men and women in past years fought and died for it. It's about us keeping the legacy alive, and in order to do this we need to be ever vigilant, not just by sending servicemen away to fight the physical threat of action, but most importantly, to fight against the insidious attacks and threats to our nation and the whittling away of our values. To do this, you must all be Anzacs. You don't need to wear a uniform to be an Anzac. You need to treasure and fight for our laws, our individual right of free speech, freedom to live a life that was so preciously given to us over the years gone by. This is an election year. In a few months' time, as you cast your vote freely and place it in the ballot box, I want you to pause and remember this service, this morning of Anzac, and that you have this freedom because some soldier somewhere gave his life to bring it about. Don't waste your freedom. Don't be a she'll be right mate Australian. Be an Anzac Australian like your oldies were. They didn't say she'll be right mate. They made sure it would be right by doing, and in many cases giving, their lives to make sure it would be right, mate. I would ask you to personally honour the sacrifice made by many servicemen and women over the years by living the best life that you know how, by being happy, being a good person, expressing gratitude for your way of life, speaking up for the rights of the vulnerable, and never standing by idly to see oppression. That's the best way to remember them and say thank you for their sacrifice on this Anzac Day. To those of you lovely people who have made a special effort to rise early on this morning and show your understanding of Anzac and what it truly means, I want to say, on behalf of all veterans and serving soldiers, sailors and airmen, thank you. Thank you for helping us celebrate this one day of the year, at least when we pay homage and remembrance to our comrades and our mates who are not with us here today. I hope you will take home with you something from our dawn service today and seriously consider what the Anzac tradition means to you and to our nation as a whole. Finally, pardon me, if I may ask for your indulgence for one little moment. I love poetry, and I'd like to share this little poem with you this morning, and it's called Me Mates. I think the Vietnam vets might like this. Me mates. I've travelled down some lonely roads, both crooked tracks and straight, and I've learned life's noblest creed, summed up in one word: mate. I'm thinking back across the years, a thing I do of late, and this word sticks between me ears. You've got to have a mate. Someone who'll take you as you are, regardless of your state, and stand as firm as Ayers Rock because he is your mate. My mind goes back to 43 and 68, to slavery at 8, when a man's one chance to stay alive depended on his mate. With bamboo for a billy can and bamboo for a plate, a bamboo paradise for bugs was bed for me and mate. You'd slip and slither through the mud and curse your rotten fate, but then you'd hear a quiet word: don't drop your bundle, mate. And though it's all so long ago, this truth I have to state: a man don't know what lonely means until he's lost his mate. If there's a life that follows this, if there's a golden gate, the welcome that I want to hear is just, good on you, mate. And so, to all who ask us why we keep these special dates, like Anzac Day, I answer why: because we're thinking of our mates. And when I've left the driver's seat and handed in me plates, I'll tell old Peter at the door I've come to join me mates. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope you have a lovely day today.